welcome, and thank you all for joining us today at the Deep Tech Forum. We're pleased to announce that this event also marks the launch of the Deep Tech Impact Fund, under the patronage of Sanctum Global Ventures and the SDG Impact Fund. My name is Karen Al-Sadi, and I will be your host for today. First, I would like to thank our charity partner, Malala Fund, and as part of our impact initiatives and for the betterment of our future generations, we will be making a charitable contribution to the Malala Fund to sponsor children's education for a year. I would also like to thank our media partners, ITP.net and the Deep Tech Insider, for all of their support and for making this event possible. As you know, we have an exciting lineup of amazing speakers from all around the globe who are going to be speaking on all areas of deep tech, such as space, quantum computing, nanobiotechnology, artificial intelligence, healthcare, smart cities, green and renewable energy, and agritech. We would like you to send your question in to our speakers on the sessions by leaving them in the chat, or you can tweet to us on @DeepTechForum on Twitter. We would also like to invite you to share your experience with the Deep Tech Forum on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn using the hashtag DeepTechForum. And now I would like to introduce you to our founder and Secretariat Chairman of the Deep Tech Forum, Rico Pang. Rico's career has spanned over 2 decades, and he has been a highly revered leader of multiple companies across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, where at the forefront, he has achieved immense global success whilst building high-performing teams. He's also a tech investor and believes in the power of tech as a way to develop talent and to reduce inequalities and subsequently reduce poverty. Please welcome Rico Pang. Hi, Rico, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Karin. Hi, everyone. My name is Rico Pang, and I'm the founder and the Secretariat Chairman of the Deep Tech Forum. It's my honor to welcome you today and joining us in this Deep Tech Forum. It's the second time we're organizing this. The whole concept of and the whole origination of Deep Tech Forum started in the middle of the pandemic in year 2021. And as venture capitalists and incubator and accelerator in the space, we have been struggling with a number of challenges. One of the major challenges that we have is convergence, and hence bringing most of the top leaders and researchers, scientists in the deep tech sector was always our focus, and meeting the demand of the market to bringing the best disruptive technologies to the space. Hence, this is a whole new convergence platform for the deep tech communities globally. The Deep Tech Forum is about encouraging talent, knowledge sharing, and wisdom, to incubate and to prepare the future generations and even the young, kids around, that we want to trigger them to explore and innovate in the deep tech sector. We have personally invited top leaders from all industry sectors, including space, robotics, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, healthcare, nanobiotechnology, agriculture technologies. Also, another area that we really want to incubate and accelerate is the sustainability in smart cities, infrastructure technologies. The broad topic of this will be shared by most of the experts and leaders in these industries. And we hope to learn more from them and impart wisdom from them and come together and use the wisdom to create a better and more sustainable future for human mankind. So without further ado, let's start and welcome our first keynote speaker. We will welcome your comments throughout the whole event, and please tweet us at Deep Tech Forum so that we can share your views and thoughts amongst the wider community. And feel free to use our chatting application here to ask questions as well. We want it to be as interactive as possible. And for those who couldn't join us today due to different time zones, and this is a global event, feel free to contact us at info@deeptechforum.com or come to our social medias and liaise with us. We will be continuing organizing a number of exciting side events this year, and our major event for Deep Tech Forum will be hosted in October this year in 2022, where we will be having much more great and exciting announcements to be made during that time. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And I'll be seeing you guys again later on in one of the sessions where we'll be launching an impact fund for the deep tech communities. I will share more details later on. But very exciting to meet you guys today, and look forward to have more conversations with you guys. Thank you very much.
So up next, we have the founder and CEO of FemPeak, Somi Aryan, and she will be speaking on understanding AI's impact in society. And this topic will be moderated by Aurelia Liandi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Somi Aryan. I'm the founder of FemPeak, and I'm also a tech philosopher. I often had difficulty explaining to people what I did. They asked me, what do you do exactly? And I was like, I'm a tech philosopher, so I'm going to explain to you what that is today. I also say I'm a tech philosopher and a transition architect. So essentially, as humans, we are entering a new age of evolution, a new phase of human evolution, where we are merging with technology. And when I say when we are merging with technology, I mean mostly, in terms of artificial intelligence. So we are already using AI to extend our abilities. When you think about what technology is a set of tools and techniques that enhance our abilities. Since the dawn of history, we've always been using different kinds of technologies to extend our abilities. For example, when we created fire, that enabled us to then enhance our cognitive abilities because of the way that we were able to pre-digest food by cooking it, right? So now that technology has brought us to a point that we are essentially entering a whole new era of human evolution. And the way I compare it, how important this AI is, it's really about, is there anything you wanted to say, moderator?
No, you have the floor, Somi. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I'm going to share my screen in a second. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background and why we are having this conversation, because it's really about taking a step back and thinking in terms of first principles. Because a lot of times what happens is that in the tech industry, people who are in deep tech often get so bogged down in the things that they're doing and in the things that they're creating that they sometimes forget about taking a step back and thinking in terms of first principles. So I'm going to share my screen now and share a presentation with you guys. Okay, put that here. Okay, so taking a step back, thinking about what, how disruption and innovation are so interconnected. Essentially, since the beginning of ever since we created technologies, we've been going through cycles of innovation and disruption. So why do we innovate? We have to think about, why do we innovate as humans? We innovate because human creativity leads to new inventions, and then those new inventions make things more efficient. And then as things become more efficient, they displace some humans, right? So they displace some people from the kind of jobs that they had, or the roles that they had in the society. So then we go through this new cycle, and constantly we are creating new roles, then disruption, then innovation, and we go through this cycle over and over. Now, disruption has always happened, but it has never been this widespread, and it has never been this fast. And that is where your role as innovators and as people who are creating technologies within deep tech comes into play, because you have to think about, how do you keep a balance between continuing with your innovation, and yet thinking about the social and economic impact of these technologies. For example, we know that artificial intelligence is going to displace so many humans, right? So many people are going to be left out of the work landscape, the career landscape, because so many jobs that are available right now, they will not be necessarily available when these machine learning algorithms are able to replace them, essentially, right? So we have to think about the impact that these technologies that we are creating is going to have. So when you think about the year 2000, beginning of the 21st century, we all celebrated it, right? Like, no matter what kind of jobs you had, what kind of role you had in society, we all celebrated the beginning of the 21st century. But many of us didn't know that these technologies the technologies of this century were going to displace us, right? So I always look at it in like, I created this little image of, it looks like Pac-Man, right? But actually this is not Pac-Man. It's essentially this character. It's basically a character that is, you can call it automation, right? And it's the combination of automation and cheap overseas labor that is replacing and displacing so many jobs. So it's eating all of our tasks. It's not necessarily eating away the job itself, but eating all of the tasks. And then as we create new tasks, so we go as humans, we keep going up one level, and then automation and artificial intelligence, essentially learns that, and then it takes that away, and then we end up with basically less and less opportunities. So we need to, as we create these new technologies, we need to be able to keep a balance between the speed of technology and being able to manage the social impact of it. So let's ask ourselves, it's worth asking ourselves, if we wanted to understand, if we wanted to have some kind of a level of prediction of what kind of jobs, what kind of tasks will be automated, is there something that we can do to enable us to make that prediction, to then be able to prepare the society for it? So essentially, for those of you who are in deep tech, which I believe that most of the people here are, any kind of task that can be defined in terms of if this, then that, will be automated, right? So now, of course, there are layers and layers of complexity to this, and there are, it's not always that easily obvious, but actually, when you think about it, when you think deeply enough about it, most things can be ultimately defined in terms of if this, then that, most of the tasks that we do. And I'm always fascinated by and completely surprised by the level of, for example, when you think of something like predictive text in emails and when you are sending a text message, etc., how accurate it is and how much better it's becoming every time, right? So there's one other telltale sign of things that can be automated away, and those are things that require less empathy, right? Like things that are that don't need as much being able to put yourself in place of the other person, in the shoes of the other person. So that kind of level of understanding of how the other person can feel. However, even that, even with that, there's a very good chance that ultimately robots and artificial intelligence will be able to learn that, because ultimately it's not necessarily about the robots being able to feel what we feel, but as long as they can understand how we would respond to something, and then they find the appropriate response and provide that response, then that may be enough to replace us, right? So for example, if you think about something, a role in the short run, a role like a nurse would be much harder to replace with artificial intelligence, whereas the role of for example, surgeon is much more easily replaceable, because it's really about precision. It doesn't require that empathy. But over time, it's feasible that also, even if the the robot or the AI doesn't necessarily feel it, as long as it can predict what kind of answer it has to provide to humans. That's also something that is possible to disrupt as well. So when we look at something like this, I created this little thing here to just sort of to give us an idea of what happens to the future of work and the types of things that humans can do versus robots can do. And it looks something like this, so it can be quite daunting when you think about it, because it will just eat away at most things, and then in the end, you're left with like a group of people who are the most creative people and of course have the technology to be able to be like the type of people that in society are creating value, right? So this is a problem, and it's a big problem that as we create these technologies, we need to think about. So because when we first started to create these machines, initially it was like we were programming the machines, right? And so you can call it a good old-fashioned AI, right? And then we started to converge. So humans and machines started to converge. And now we are getting to a point that machines are taking off and actually leaving us behind. So and that's happening so fast. So our job as people who are in the technology space is to really think about the impact of these things. For the rest of today, I know that you will be going through so many other conversations and talks that are potentially going to be a lot more technical. But I think it's very appropriate to start with the first principles and think about the impact of these technologies that we are creating, right? So what can we do about this? So the truth is that we are going through a phase of accelerated transition. It's a constant transition from one thing to another in the way that these technologies are developing. So for example, we need to be able to reimagine time, the value of time. We need to be able to think in terms of transition architecture. What do I mean by transition architecture? Think about something like if in the past our identities in the digital space or our identities in reality, if our identities were more like a house, right? So you would have strong foundations for your identity. Now in the future, and as we go through this age of the metaverse and living more and more online, our identities are becoming more like a tent rather than a house, right? So it means that we have to constantly be ready for and have the ability to constantly pack up those tents and go from one place to another, right? So this requires us to create a new form of architecture, and I don't mean like a physical architecture, but like the architecture of our human identity and the way that we are building these new spaces for us to live in and be able to actually function in, right? So it requires a new form of architecture that is ready to be constantly in transition. And then, of course, there's the human-machine relation. Relations. How do we how do we react to? How do we relate to these machines that we are creating? And of course, we've got a pretty short presentation today. There's not a lot of time to go into things like uncanny valley and things like that. But if there are some questions in the end, we can look at those. And then so now, what do we do? So let's think about, okay, we need to reimagine time. We need to think about transition architecture and human-machine relations. So how do we approach that? Essentially, there are 4 human skills that I actually talked about in my book, which is about the future of work. And these 4 skills, I call them human skills. These human skills are things that we need to develop more than ever in this age of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And these are critical thinking, emotional intelligence, contextual creativity, and mindfulness. So I'm going to very quickly touch upon all of these and kind of give some further ideas of what I mean by them. So critical thinking, what we mean by that is our ability to understand probability, right? To get a really good understanding of and feel for a probability. And actually, you'll be surprised that actually human beings are not very good at this, because really at the core of it, it's about statistics, and it's about developing an intuition for statistics. And most of the time that doesn't come to us naturally. So especially as we interact with machines and artificial intelligence more and more, the possibility of these machines being able to create an effect which we call anchoring, which means that they affect the way that we think about, and react to different things, is going to be impacted more and more. You can think about it something like, a good example of it is like how, for example, our thinking is being shaped on social media like TikTok and things like Instagram Reels and things like that, because these are developed by machine learning algorithms that are affecting the way that we interact with probability and or understand probability and anchor our thinking. So to give you an example of that, think about something like, if you are watching reels, right, that are constantly pushing your thinking in terms of a specific direction. Let's say something very big is happening in the world, say the Ukraine war is happening, but these machine learning algorithms, they are affecting the way that you're thinking, is like that you are completely left out of, like you're completely driven away from the reality and the things that are happening in the world, right? And instead you would be thinking about something completely inconsequential. So these are the ways that we need to use our critical thinking to think about, okay, how am I being impacted by these technologies? How am I being impacted by these AI algorithms, right? And take a step back and think, am I being programmed essentially with these machine learning algorithms? And now I don't necessarily mean that somebody is sitting there programming you. It's just that these machine learning algorithms, they keep learning and learning, right? And they are impacting our thinking and our future in a way that we are not necessarily even always aware of. So as people who are in deep tech and developing these technologies, you need to be thinking about, how is this technology that you're developing, how is it going to impact the future of humanity and the kind of legacy that you want to be leaving behind. So the other thing about critical thinking is about having the ability to prioritize and being able to have that healthy skepticism. And these are kind of muscles that we need to develop, and we need to enhance and make sure that we strengthen them. And the more we rely on social media, social media, and not necessarily just social media, but actually the algorithm, the more we rely on the algorithms, the machine learning that is affecting these muscles in us, basically we are those muscles atrophy, and we are less and less able to react to them based on our critical thinking. Another thing is contextual creativity. So what do we mean by contextual creativity? Contextual creativity is different from, let's say, artistic creativity. Contextual creativity is about being able to see the big picture and being able to connect the dots and being able to find new solutions and invent new paths. So I always give the example of something like, the iPod, right? Like when Steve Jobs thought of creating iPod, that's a really amazing example of contextual creativity. These are the kind of things that, like, the deep problem solving that actually we can collaborate with and combine our thinking with artificial intelligence to actually create more of that. But also sometimes it's worth being able to step outside of it and think differently. And not always rely on it. So the other thing is emotional intelligence, which is really about understanding how you feel, how others feel, and how you can help, right? So having that kind of compassionate way of thinking about our fellow humans and thinking and all other living beings and our planet, and being able to really step outside of technology sometimes and just like really have that deep connection with the world outside. And then finally, I talk about mindfulness. And mindfulness, really, I don't mean by mindfulness that you sit there and meditate for 20 minutes a day. What I mean by it is that having that kind of deliberate attention and awareness, and being able to be open and receptive and inquisitive, and not necessarily have that kind of constant comparing and judgment, right? Being able to step outside of all that. The best way that I always talk about and explain mindfulness for me is really about being present in the moment and being present and connected, right? Have that kind of feeling of being an active participant and not a passive observer, not necessarily putting yourself in a position where you're driven by technology, but you are driving technology, or you are co-evolving with technology. So there's a little exercise that I usually do whenever I want to kind of like practice my mindfulness muscle. You can look at this little exercise. This is just one example of the kind of exercises that you can do to practically actually develop that, right? So when you look at this, if I tell you, just tell me the colors, don't tell me the words, right? So it's very, very hard to do it actually, right? When you look at you keep wanting to say blue, but really you should be able to say yellow, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so that's one of the ways that you can, this is a practical way that you can practice. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Somi. Honestly, very impressive presentation. And I have one or two questions for you from some of our audience members. The first one is really, I think, a question that I do ask myself as well, is can artificial intelligence actually steal our jobs eventually? And because statistically, it's said that over the past 4 or 5 years, AI specialist positions hiring has increased by almost 74%. And people like myself or the general public, I think, would then ask themselves, does this mean we're eventually losing our jobs to robots, or?
Yes, that's the simple answer. The robots will be able to do everything better than us. Even if you're like, even if we are reduced to just sitting home and playing games in the metaverse, there will be robots that will be doing that better than us. So we really have to think about these technologies that we are developing. And I love technology, and I'm all up for it. I think that we are morphing into a new species, but I think it's important that we understand. That's why I said about not being a passive observer, but being an active participant. I believe that what's happening to us is as important as when we went from reptiles to mammals. Now we are going from mammals to something else. And with this something else, we don't yet know what it is. We are already no longer Homo sapiens.
Exactly. No, and obviously on one side, we're very excited about all these new technologies coming.
Hi, Somi. How are you?
Good. Not sure what happened there.
Technical difficulties there. But yes, thank you so much for being part of this event with us, and we wish you all of the best.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So up next, we have Teemu Arina, and he is a chief biohacker and chairman of the board, as well as a renowned author at Biohacker Center. And he'll be speaking on human exponential humanity in the age of biological machines. And this session will be hosted by Rico Pang.
Is Teemu on stage as well? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Teemu Arina, who is an iconic person in the biohacking space. He's an international recognized figure, pioneering the human ingredient in the future. He's also an awarded biohacker himself, best-selling author and award-winning keynote speakers. And he co-authored the book of defining the best-selling biohacker handbook for a series of optimizing health and performance with biological and technological tools. So without further ado, Teemu Arina, the stage is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rico. So I'm delighted to be here. Let me share my screen. Here we go. And share. There we go. Hopefully it's visible. Yeah, so yeah, I will be diving into how to upgrade what it means to be human in the age of biological machines. So it's exponential times. That's why I have in the humans, I have the exponent mark as well. That's what we are going towards. We are basically looking at humanity accelerating in terms of the way how we use technology, but also biologically, we will be evolving together with our technology as we go forward. And this was very exciting times for sure. Let me define biohacking, what that means. So biohacking is health and performance optimization based on lifestyle and medical and technological interventions, informed by science, bioinformatics, self-quantification, and guided self-experiments. So what we're basically looking at here is how can we optimize what it means to be human? Many people approach biohacking first from the point of view of like, how can I like have better cognitive performance or better attention focus and energy management when it comes to, you know, my body and my mind. But as people age and as they stress out and overwork, they get more interested in metabolic health, in nervous system health, in cardiovascular health, these aspects that are very key for helping you to live long and prosper. Now, if you live long enough, you probably get interested also in anti-aging and rejuvenation technologies and how to prevent disease as you age. But most people, when they get into biohacking, they get one of these sleep trackers. They might get a ring or a wristband or something like this, and they start to track their sleep and recovery and see how they're doing. Those are basically biometric data. And we have a lot of different type of data that we can get from the human body. So we're looking at as well on biomarkers. So that's your blood values and genetic data as well. So we can combine the different data points to better understand all these aspects of like, how can we really optimize your mind and body by using technology, nutrition, lifestyle modifications, and so on. I wrote a book called The Biohacker's Handbook. It's available at biohackercenter.com. I have the link in the end. But it's a very big book. It's about 500 pages, and it goes deep into optimizing what it means to be human. I wrote it together with a nutrition specialist called Jaakko Halmetto and a doctor, holistic functional doctor called Olli Sovijärvi, who is very famous in this part of the world where I am. I'm a technologist, so I'm looking at these things from the technology angle, but I do understand the biochemistry as well. And in this book, we go through the kind of 5 key pillars of your life: sleep, exercise, nutrition, mind, and work, and how those can be understood as systems and how those systems can be optimized for better health and well-being. Basically, the human body is kind of a biological computer. And if you look at sleep in your brain, we can see in the EEG, the brain waves, we can see different changes as you go to sleep. So we can understand the depth and deepness of your sleep, as well as recovery that happens, memory consolidation, and so on. Once you understand that, you can also start to like look at things, how you can use to optimize your sleep. In terms of nutrition, we might look at your digestion, we might look at nutrient absorption, we might look at genetics, like how your body processes different molecules through different biochemical pathways, etc. So all of these can be understood through the lens of systems. And once you understand the systems, then we can optimize them. Now, I'm organizing a conference called the Biohackers Summit in Helsinki next week, 3 and 4 of June. By the way, it's also available online. So if you are not able to travel to Helsinki at this time to join, 800 other people interested in optimizing their health, you can also follow this online. We are focusing specifically on this aging aspect and reversing aging and how to extend the health span. Now, if we look at age in general, it took us as humanity, it took us a long time to reach 1 billion people on this planet. As we entered the Industrial Revolution, our technological capability went off the roof. With the technological capability, also our understanding of medicine improved. Hygiene was a big thing during war times, for example, that saved lives. Our discovery of bacteria, as well as antibiotics, certain vaccines later on, but a lot of different interventions that help us to make sure that you're not dying, infectious disease, but you're more likely to die in something called a degenerative disease. So something that is related to aging. Those are things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancers, etc. Actually, for someone my age, I just turned 40. Someone my age or lower, the highest likelihood of you dying is actually getting into a traumatic accident, like in a car accident or something like this. So I recommend you to use a seatbelt. But in a sense, like what we have seen is doubling human life expectancy from 45 years old on average to over 80, 85, for example, in my country, in Finland. And that is because of our discoveries in medicine and healthcare, and also the improvements of logistics, of food, products, etc., hygiene, so many things. And we can expect this to continue. If we take all the technologies that we have today, we might be able to push human average lifespan to, let's say, 90, maybe a little bit more. But I believe that in our lifetime, already the person who will live 150 years old has been born. It might be you. So if you live long enough, you might be able to escape the kind of aging trajectory. So with all these regenerative medicines, we might be able to reverse conditions that are related to aging, that are causative and related to the fact that we at maximum will live like 120 years old if you are lucky enough to become a centenarian. But most of us are not as lucky. So 27% of world population lives with multiple chronic conditions. If you live to more than 65 years old, 64% will have 2 or more chronic conditions overlapping. If you look at the leading causes of early death and disability, we have heart disease, we have strokes, we have cancers, all of that, respiratory diseases. But even the workplace, we have low back pain, we have spinal cord issues, we have all kinds of things, headaches, but mainly like our bodies are deteriorating as we age. It's not necessarily an external force like a bacterial virus that will take you. With medical treatments, we have been able to double lifespan expectancy from 45 to 85. With good lifestyle choices like food choices, exercise, supplementation, good social support, you might be able to live to become a centenarian. I believe that with biohacking technologies, we will be able to push that even further, 100, 150, potentially in the next few decades. One of the key aspects here is that current healthcare system is actually held in hindsight. It is not healthcare, it is sick care. It is focused on sickness, it's focused on diagnosing sickness, it's focused on therapies and sickness. In a sick care system, you are not diagnosing things that might break out in 20, 30 years of your life because you don't have any symptoms yet. But with preventive medicine or predictive medicine or predictive healthcare, we will be able to use data to predict that, like, these genetic pathways, this diet, these lifestyle choices, this stress load that you're under, whatever, this health condition that is like slowly creeping onto you. Maybe it's hormonal, maybe it's some kind of cancer, whatever is going to take you in 20, 30 years time. But we are not treating that bug in a sense until it's too late. And when you have symptoms, it's often already too late, like getting a diabetes as an adult. It's very hard to reverse. It's possible, but it's very hard. So you better start, today. And with data, we can access and we can personalize that to the individual and figure out from population studies and your personal data sets, we can figure out that these patterns of behavior might be leading to your earlier demise than you believe. And by doing a few modifications, we might be able to reverse some of those aspects. And many of those aspects are actually related to lifestyle, the way how you deal with your environment, how you deal with exercise, with diets, with sleep, stress management, and so on. Now, the human biological computer, and the blueprint is, by the way, here behind. It's different like biomedical pathways that we know that exist in the human body is very much a computer. So if you start from the lower levels, you start from DNA, you go to protein synthesis, you go to different pathways, you go into the organ systems, and you go into the organism itself. What you see is different signals. It could be electric signals in the nervous system. It can be biochemical messengers or packages. Just like between computers, your body is sending different types of information around, and it's acting on it to your synapses and to your nervous system and lymphatic system and cardiovascular system, etc. We can map this out, and we can understand what's going on, and we can understand also how that relates to the environment. So we can look at how it connects to the wider ecology. We can look at the bacteria in your gut. It's called the microbiome. We can look at it on your skin. We see the interaction because in the end, who is you is a connection of different intelligences. There's actually more microorganisms in your body than there are your own individual cells. They're just way more microscopic. And those guys are also affecting the homeostasis or the balance in your body. And sometimes they are supporting your immunity. Sometimes it is actually hindering your immunity. So it's good to understand like how this diversity of different species living in you are connected to you. And we are not isolated from our environment. I believe that the future of health is in the data. So not just health records, not just genetic information, but data from your environment, from your behavior, from your phenotype, from your activities. This can be mined. It can be understood through machine learning. We can look at the metabolome and the metabolomics, and we can figure out like how to optimize health. Now, bioinformatics will be for health what the microscope was for biology or what the telescope was for astronomy. I believe so. Health is, in my experience, to be in balance. Imbalance leads to disease. Your body has all these homeostatic systems that are trying to keep the balance. And we can understand those things, for example, in terms of your blood work. Now, here's some of those like biomarkers from my own experience from the last 10 years or so. I've been measuring on a regular basis, like different aspects, like over 100 biomarkers. So here's a little snapshot, some highlights on it. I've been able to reverse heart disease risk, diabetes risk, organ failure risk, and the risk of becoming an old man, just hormonally. When labs do these tests, they look at reference range. So when you're on green, you're kind of within reference range. But when you're within green, it doesn't mean it's optimal. For example, with this ratio, you want to be as low as possible. With hemoglobin A1C, you definitely want that to be as low as possible. With hormones, you don't want it to be as low as possible. You want it to be as high as possible, but not too high, because that is linked to cancers. So you want to be a healthy human. And at the age of 30, when I started doing these things, I looked like I'm a 45-year-old man. Now at 40, I look like I'm a 25-year-old man. So a lot of these changes are not random. They are the result of systematic health and performance optimization. And we can start from, human genetics. We can look at the human genome, the sequencing, and the cost of it has gone down dramatically. From 10 years ago, it was 10 million. Now it's like less than $1,000. You can get like a pretty good picture of what you're made out of. From that, you can understand your aging as well. When we look at epigenetic change from the whole human genome. When I did this test, I was 2 years younger than what I'm chronologically. And there's different tests that you can do on telomere length, on glycation, biomarkers, a lot of things. On different measures, I'm somewhere between 25 and 35, even though I'm 40. Now, from genetics, you can also optimize things like nutrition. It's called nutrigenomics. So applying genetics on nutrition. I understand, for example, that I have higher risk of getting celiac disease as an adult if I would consume wheat products a lot. Like I don't have like gluten intolerance, so I don't have celiac disease. I don't have like clear allergic reactions, but I have the genetic makeup that would trigger potentially that condition later in life. So I want to silence those genes as much as possible by not triggering them, by not pressing those buttons. Once you know what buttons you are made out of, you know which buttons to press and in which way, and that is often linked to lifestyle. Now we can gather a lot of biometric information and biosignals also from the human body. Peter Drucker, who was a management theorist, said that what gets measured gets managed. That's definitely true for companies. It's also true for you. Do you know what your black box, your body is actually made out of, like how you optimize it based on data? I do nowadays because of quantified self. So I've been tracking, a lot of different data points, from diet to activity to biomarkers to brain activity to sleep quality and mood and many other things and labs. And there are all these sensors that we can use, not just pedometrics that give you like steps, but now we have intelligence, artificial intelligence built in as software that starts to be your coach. Basically, you have like an Olympic athlete coach in your pocket that knows you better than you do. And based on the data that we are receiving, we can read between the lines even more than ever before. And these are way cheaper and way more accurate than they were, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. And they are becoming cheaper and cheaper and more accurate and better with how you charge them or how you fuel them. Maybe in the future it's fully kinetic, so kinetic energy, you don't need a battery. But in the end, we will be able to gather data in such a way that we become not just blood donors, but data donors. We donate our data. And many people maybe have, a sleep tracker like the Oura Ring, which is a Finnish invention for tracking their sleep and activity and understanding the recovery. So this device has so many different things, from heart rate monitor to temperature monitor to understanding the sleep components. And from that, it can devise a lot of interesting data points. For example, understanding in your chronotype, like what time of the day you should go to sleep. Like not everyone is actually an early riser in the morning or a night owl. Like this is a genetic thing, but it's also a behavioral thing. But we can see from the sleep data what would be optimal for you, when to wake up, when to go to sleep. We can see from this data when you're actually recovered. Even if you slept 8 hours, it doesn't mean you fully recovered, because what should happen to your heart rate? It should start coming up a little bit in the morning because of cortisol release. And it should look like a hammock. And then there's the heart rate variability. You should see amplitude increasing in your heart rate variability, which is an indicator of stress and recovery. Now, if we look forward, just a few years forward, the ideas of where we are going as exponential humanity. With exponential technologies, we see that exponential change is such that in the next few years, the change is going to be as much as in the last 10 years or a few decades. I believe so, with artificial intelligence, mixed reality, virtual reality, synthetic biology, all of these. Many science fiction authors have seen these things coming, like Werner Winch in 2006 in the book Rainbow's End was describing ubiquitous high band networking, where you are earning small income through informal part-time work, let's call that crypto or something like this, proof of work, Internet of Things. People have like some kind of headgear or eye gear, which they can use to overlay information on the retina, on what they see. We see everyone is connected to everyone else, and that causes all kinds of problems. We have people on metaverse, so avatars meeting in a virtual point. We have augmented reality applications. We have artificial intelligence acting as a digital assistant. We have understanding of anti-aging and how to reverse aging capabilities. And we have home delivery of goods. Like none of this existed like 2006. This guy was able to predict it. And now we see that it's very much becoming true. Another book from 85, Bruce Sterling, Schismatrix Plus, describes a future where we don't have political parties like the left and the right, but we have people who modify themselves through biology and people who modify themselves through technology. And these are the guys who are basically deciding the future of humanity. We are moving from evolution by natural selection to evolution by intelligent design, where we become part of influencing where we are going as humanity. We see anti-aging genetic engineering emerging. So we might be able to reverse a lot of genetic conditions or aging conditions through gene therapies. We see regenerative medicine. We can regrow tissues, 3D print organs. We can fix bugs. We can use stem cells. We see technological extensions of humans, cyborg attachments on humans. Like think of Elon Musk and his Neuralink technology, connecting humans to computers. We see like the most extreme treatments. Like if medicine can save you, like you have diabetes and Alzheimer's, and we don't know what to do, we're gonna freeze you up. We're gonna freeze you up, slow down time, and we're gonna reanimate you once medicine has developed, once science and technology has developed far enough, so that we can bring you back to life and we can fix that problem before your body breaks down. And there is thousands of people or tens of thousands of people already around the world who have the capability of being cryopreserved if they die or are at the risk of dying. And then we have, of course, artificial intelligence, which might be able to replicate you in a digital realm, or you can't really like say like pick a difference between a human and a machine online. So we might have AI that is passing the Turing test, so you can recognize if it's a machine or not. Now, I see that AI is mainly supporting human activity today, and together with machines, we are better. I don't see technology taking over, but if you die, technology can totally take you over. You can create like a digital immortality so that you keep on posting on social media, but it's an AI that just replicates what Teemu would probably post for the next few decades for the amusement of his family, even though he's dead. His ideas or his nervous system as a learned system might be able to continue learning and continue growing. I believe that the biggest transition is now from industrial revolution in terms of automation and assembly lines to augmenting humans. We will be augmenting human capabilities in so many different ways. And we see this as the fifth industrial revolution. So we move from mechanized production and mass production to computerization and optimized supply chains and all that, to the current one, which is the technological convergence of AI, big data, robotics, different user interfaces. Like think of self-driving cars, for example, or a smartphone, like how that converges all these different technological capabilities, software, hardware into one. The next one is the convergence between technology and biology. So the machine is converging with your body. It's already on your skin as a smartwatch. It's already in your skin as a smart ring. Next, it's going to be in your body. You know, it's a freaking nanobot in your nervous system or in your lymphatic system, tapping cancer cells or supporting your cognitive faculties. Synthetic biology is a very interesting area. Joy Ito, one of the directors of MIT Media Lab, previous one, he said that biology is the next digital. Bio is the next digital. And that's why I'm in the field of biohacking myself. I think it's the next thing. I'm also kind of interested to look beyond. So if we are optimizing ourselves, the question is like, for what reason? Of course, for resilience and becoming, harder to kill, but also like to evolve as a human being. And that's why we are working on a next book called The Resilient Being, which is about mastering your biology for resilience, immunity, and longevity. If you're interested in any of this stuff, I recommend you highly to go to biohackersummit.com, sign up for our online stream. It's going to go on next week. A lot of more intelligent people than me are going to talk about these topics in depth and give you practical tips. And if you can come to Helsinki, we still have a few tickets. If you can't, we can organize one in Amsterdam in October. But with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teemu. I think we have time for some questions here. So Kari, please bear with us. I think let's go through the questions quickly, Teemu, from the crowd. Teemu, the questions from Pamela. She's turning 32 soon. Do you think she's too old to be considered one of the population who will live to 150?
What did she say an age?
Yeah, she's 32 now.
32. Okay. I think she has a really good likelihood of escaping the aging trajectory, because there are 10 hallmarks of aging. There's actually 9, but they're adding a 10th one. So those are the mechanisms of aging, and we have a pretty good idea of many of them. And I think we will figure them out in the next 5-10 years. And once you turn like 45, from there on, it's downhill. From 40, it's already a downhill for many, but from 45 onwards, it's a downhill. So you have a decade still ahead of you of technological progress that can help you to deal with what comes after you turn 45. And then, like, if you are already 50 or something like this, man, I don't know if we can help you, but hopefully we can at least put you as a brain in a jar or something like that.
Great. I hope that answers your questions, Pamela. Another questions, do we have top 3 supplement recommendation that may gain momentum over the next 5 to 10 years, like prebiotics or nicotinamide or mononucleotide NMN sort of things? Yeah.
Yeah. So NAD plus, so nicotinamide riboside, is a molecule that is very essential for energy production in the human body and in cells particularly. And as you age, you lose mitochondria and your NAD production goes down, and that slows down recovery and it speeds up aging, and it has all these different things. And maybe we will have molecular ways like taking NAD supplements to mitigate some of that damage. But the human body is a homeostatic system, and many of these anti-aging treatments turn out to be, if you overdo them, can also be cancer promoting. This is something that is very good to keep in mind, like all these hormonal therapies and everything. Like it's a sweet spot that you want to kind of go for. So more is not better with most things, just enough so that you can kind of keep your body functioning properly. Like even melatonin, as you age, your body is producing less melatonin. Microdosing a little bit of melatonin is probably a good idea. But if you're a young, healthy adult, I don't think you get much benefit of taking melatonin specifically, although it helps with recovery and it's actually a key component in the immune system as well. It's not just a sleep hormone. So what I'm really excited about myself in the end is a whole food diet, so that you get, nutrient dense foods, and then you supplement on top of that. So you measure and you figure out where your deficiencies are and you fix those, so that you oil the system in a sense. Because if you are taking stimulants or uppers or like nootropics or whatever that boost your performance, often you're burning the candle from both ends. Maybe it increases your heart rate. Maybe it's like, it's cancer promoting even. Like there's so many different things and aspects that you need to take into account. And I don't think there is a silver bullet to any of these, but I will die trying myself all of these things for sure.
Thank you very much, Timo. There are more questions, but due to time constraints, we'll leave it to later. And I will, thank you again, Timo, for joining us, and look forward to, you guys joining the Biohacking Summit in Helsinki in June 3rd and 4th. And the ticket links available in the Deep Tech Forum chatting. Thank you very much, Timo. I will pass the stage back to the host, Karin, to bring back the next speakers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you, Timo, for that, and we wish you all the best. Up next, we have Raphael Rotgen, and he is the Managing Director of E2MC Ventures. He'll be speaking on innovation in the global space sector and the need for private investment, and this session will be moderated by Rico Pang.
So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Raphael, from the E2MC Ventures. Raphael is the managing director, and they have been working a lot in the global space sector. And we have spoken before in the last DPTech forum. And this time around, we should be speaking a lot more on the need for private investment. As we are all aware, capital is always very important in the incubation and accelerating tech businesses. And with further ado, Raphael, the stage is yours. Please feel free to share with us your latest innovation in the space sector, and what are your pointers in the private investment strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Rico, and it's a pleasure to be back here at Deep Tech Forum. So let me share my screen without any further ado, as you mentioned. Over here. I hope you can see that. Okay, terrific. Yeah, so this is just going to be a very quick overview, reminding ourselves what's going on in the space sector, and then how can we arrange the financing for these important activities for humanity. I think you already given the introduction of myself. My main job is basically being a space venture capitalist through something called E2MC Ventures, which is an early stage investor in space companies worldwide. And I'm also quite active in space outreach and education. I have a podcast called the Space Business Podcast and a few online courses about space business, which people can look up online under my name. This is the podcast. Right, so just to remind ourselves, space, why is this such an interesting moment in space? And really at the root of it is the picture here on the left. Many of you will recognize this is SpaceX Falcon boosters landing back on Earth. This is actually from a Falcon Heavy launch, so it's the two side boosters landing back. Actually, the central booster usually also comes back. So all three first stages of that rocket are reused, and that's just very different from what happened in the past when we basically threw away entire rockets. And as you can imagine, not throwing away even part of a rocket, it saves a lot of money. And that really, of course, started it all sort of in the recent years, because it has helped to bring down the cost of space transportation dramatically. So, if we look at something like taking 1 kilogram of mass to what we call a low Earth orbit, until a few years ago, even in a big rocket, you would have probably looked at least $10,000 for 1 kilogram to low Earth orbit. And SpaceX, it's less than 3,000 if you take the entire rocket. If you do what's called a ride share, it's about 5,000. And importantly, with SpaceX's next generation rocket, the Starship, which many people will be aware of, that they're testing right now in Texas, this may drop by another order of magnitude or more. So getting to space is much cheaper, but that's not the only thing that's getting cheaper. Actually, operating in space is also getting much cheaper. And that's got to do with things that all of the costs of space components, and including entire satellites, are dropping dramatically as well. And this is sort of a combination of general technological trends, things dropping, along curves like Moore's law, as well as a consequence of the fact that we're in space moving from low unit numbers to higher unit numbers. Like we used to make very few satellites, now we're making many more satellites. And of course that produces economies of scale. So the bottom line is space is getting much cheaper. And the consequence of that is that suddenly means a lot more business models are economically viable to execute in space, which were not economically viable before. I mean, the old prejudice, or one of the old prejudices against space, is it's extremely expensive. It's only for governments. But that really has been changing the last few years, and it will continue to change in this direction. And this is why you have now here the last point on this slide, these projections that the space economy will grow to trillion or trillions of dollars over the next few years. The most recent one, I think, was a report by Citibank out just a couple of days ago, which projecting $1 trillion by 2040 in global revenues. Right, so that's a reminder of the big trends to set the stage. A reminder of what is actually going on in space in terms of business models. So this is an infographic we developed at my fund to kind of make it easy to give people an overview. And if we start here on Earth, there's some things which are basically happening that are starting in Earth, like, for example, launching rockets. You have companies whose business it is to launch rockets, like parts of SpaceX, that's their business, right? Or companies like Rocket Lab from New Zealand. You have people who build satellites or parts of satellites. You have people who analyze satellite data. So they don't actually have to go to space. They just buy the satellite data, but analyze it here on Earth with data scientists. And you have what's called a ground segment as well, excuse me, here on Earth. So in order to communicate with satellites and get the data back, you need ground stations. And that's another business that exists here on Earth. If we now move towards orbit, we have a number of business models which have been around for a while, and that includes, for example, satellite communications. I mean, traditionally, that's been mostly satellite TV, but now we're increasingly having satellite internet, satellite broadband connectivity. We have what's called remote sensing, or sometimes Earth observation. Remote sensing is the more general term. So that's basically exactly what the name says. It's observing the Earth with some type of sensor. It could be an optical camera, but it could also be infrared or what we call hyperspectral, or an active sensor like radar. And all of these different sensors can provide us with different insights about what's going on Earth. And that has traditionally had use cases primarily for national security and weather, but now we're discovering more and more use cases like agriculture, like other things, insurance, oil and gas, metals and mining. Almost any terrestrial sector you can think of can benefit from satellite imagery. Satellite navigation, everybody will be familiar with in their daily lives. And that's, of course, a very important business as well. So these three businesses, satellite communications, remote sensing, navigation, have been around for a while, have been known for a while. But then we also have the newer businesses like space tourism. And many of you will have followed the number of sort of private space missions that have been taking place over the last couple of years. Most recently, a mission called Axiom 1 that took 3 paying passengers to International Space Station. They paid $55 million each to go on a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule, and then was meant to spend 10 days on the International Space Station. But luckily for them, there was weather delays, so they actually got more time. We have space stations, and there's a number of space stations now being built and proposed, and those can be used for a number of purposes. Again, it could be used for tourism, but it could also be used for things like in-space manufacturing. And this actually makes sense to manufacture certain things in space, taking advantage of the microgravity conditions. And there's a number of examples which we've known for a while because we've done experiments in space for a long time. But again, these things were never economically viable to exploit for businesses, but now they become economically viable. So, and this includes potential products like optical fibers, certain biological materials, certain other types of advanced materials, including advanced semiconductors. We have a number of what we call orbit services, in-space services, and that's really a range of things. It includes things like refueling in space, removing space debris, taking you from one location in space to another via what we call space tugs. And these businesses are also like right now slowly coming online. Then if you move further away from Earth, the moon is starting to get interesting. And there's actually a large number of at least robotic missions planned to the moon starting later this year. And then, of course, even crewed missions. So NASA has the so-called Artemis missions, which were originally meant to land the next astronauts in 2024. I think now the consensus is that's going to be pushed out at least a couple of years or so. But humans are returning to the moon, and people are starting to think about what kind of businesses could we actually have on the moon. Again, it could be things like tourism, but it could also be things like using the resources present on the moon, including there's a large amount of water on the moon in the form of ice that we now know about. And then you go out from there and you go towards Mars and the asteroid belt, but that's of course further in the future. So that's just a reminder first of the trends and then of the kind of businesses we have in space. Now, if you look at the financing side, so there's of course many exciting things to do here, but they cost money. One important thing that I want to point out here is, again, there's been this historical stereotype that everything in space is horrifically expensive. And that's actually not true. There's a range of activities, right? So if we start on the left here, of course, there are some things which literally require investment in the billions of dollars, like large constellations of satellites like SpaceX is doing with their Starlink internet constellation, big space stations, large rockets like SpaceX's Starship. Lunar activities can be very expensive. So you're more towards the billions of dollars. Then you have some activities like here in the middle, which are probably more in the hundreds of millions, smaller rockets, satellite ground stations, some in-orbit activities. That spider-like spacecraft you see here in the middle on the lower left, that's actually a spacecraft that's built to remove large pieces of space debris. It's a robotic autonomous spacecraft. And the total financing need there is probably in the hundreds of millions rather than the billions. But then interestingly, there's business models which even need much less money. And so if you go to the right, those are just a couple of satellite images, right? On the top image is of basically an oil storage facility. And why would you want to observe that? Well, maybe you're an oil trader. You want to understand what's the inventory level in that oil storage facility. And then the lower picture is an image that's a national security example. That's an image of Pyongyang in North Korea, which probably the only way to observe Pyongyang is via satellite for quite obvious reasons. So the reason I put this here in the lower capital intensive category is because there's a range of businesses you can imagine now on Earth that take advantage of the increasing amount of satellite imagery we have, because there's already a number of imaging satellites in orbit, and a lot more are going up over the next few years. So we have a lot of imagery from orbit. And again, different types of sensors, optical, infrared, hyperspectral, radar, which are, each type of sensor is well suited to specific use cases. But that means we can take this data and we can start really analyzing it in value added ways for certain customer industries on Earth. But perceive that for this type of business model, if you don't own your own satellites, it's not very capital intensive at all. You effectively have a space business, but your biggest cost is basically, is OpEx. You spend OpEx on computing time through AWS or Azure or something, and then basically hiring a bunch of data scientists. So it's a long way away from the billions of dollars that you can spend on other space business models. So just keep that in mind, that there's a range of business models in space. In terms of sources of funding, one way you can divide it is just public sources of funding and private sources of funding. On the public side, it can come from space agencies. Also very important, always has been in space, is the military as well as the intelligence community, especially in countries like the US or China for that sake. You could have development agencies in certain countries. On the private side, it's basically all of the sort of typical sources of funding for companies, ranging from angels, smaller angel checks. We even now have crowdfunding in space. I'm on the investment committee of something called Spaced Ventures in the US, which is a purely space-focused crowdfunding platform, which has now already raised money for several companies. Of course, traditional VCs, including specialist VCs like my own E2MC, corporate VCs, for example, from aerospace companies like Airbus, Boeing, Lockheed, all have VC arms investing in space companies. Bigger financial institutions like hedge funds or private equity funds, especially for later stage rounds, and a lot of them have started to get involved in space. And of course, the public markets, the stock exchanges, right? And there we've seen a lot of activity the last 18 months or so, and a lot of that in the form of mergers with SPACs, which of course is controversial, but quite a few transactions have gotten done. With more or less success, which I think I have a separate slide on. Different investors, I'm not going to go through this in detail. Different investors have different characteristics in terms of coming in at the various stages and different industry knowledge. Just to point out, there is a lot of money available for space. So this is examples from 2021. Of course, we have to see how this now plays out, space funding rounds or generally venture funding rounds right now, the next 2 or 3 months. Of course, the market environment is now different from a few months ago. But certainly last year, we've had some very large rounds. I mean, SpaceX raised several times for a total of $1 billion. OneWeb, which is another broadband communications constellation, almost raised $2 billion over several rounds, and many rounds in the hundreds of millions of dollars for some of these more capital intensive business models, as I explained on a previous slide. And then I mentioned the SPACs, and this is probably hard to read, but it's just to make the point that there were over a dozen mergers between SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, and space companies, taking those companies public via the SPAC merger, right? And in the process, raising money for the space companies, right? Because the SPACs obviously have cash in the trust. As well, typically you have additional investors which come in at the time of the merger, so-called PIPE investors. Now, this route of financing is probably almost certainly temporarily closed because of a lot of the SPACs have been performing very poorly. But SPACs have been around for decades. Actually, some people are not aware of that, and there's always these cycles. And I'm actually quite convinced that SPACs will come back, probably in a better shape, in a better regulated shape, within a certain time frame, and we will see more of these transactions. Probably not in the next few months. I don't think that's very realistic, unless what we may still see is sort of the back end of the previous SPAC boom, because there's still a lot of SPACs out there which are looking for merger candidates, and it's possible that some of them may end up merging with a space company, but it will not raise as much cash as was raised before in these transactions. And here, this is driving the point home also public markets. This is not even updated for the most recent sort of leg down, but here we have an internally developed space index, which is in red, and then the NASDAQ in blue. and the S&P in green. And you could see that towards the end of 2020, the space index really started outperforming quite dramatically. And that's also when the SPAC transaction started to happen. But then sort of beginning of sort of second half of last year, the space index outperformance was basically all given back, and you kind of ended up back to where the S&P was. If we extended this to today, you'd probably even see some underperformance of the space index, I would imagine, which may mean it for selected space companies, it may be an interesting entry point, but certainly not for all. To finish up here, I think it's important to point out some space-specific challenges that we hear a lot from generalist investors. And I say we, when my own fund, we obviously go fundraising as well, right, from family offices and other people. And what are some of the things we often hear, and how can we respond to them? Well, one point is, well, it's a deep tech industry, and that's intimidating. It's literally rocket science, right? Often we say it's not rocket science, but this is rocket science. Well, then, of course, my self-serving response is, that's true. That's why you should outsource to specialist investors like myself or another fund like ours. Another sort of critique or concern is, which I mentioned before, is people think that all of the business models are very capital intensive, need a lot of money. You've already seen my response that there's a wide range here, actually, and some business models are actually not capital intensive. So you can construct a portfolio that's a mix. Related to that, the third bullet point is some people concerned, well, isn't it a really long time frame? Don't space projects take years and years and years until you see revenue and let alone profits and cash flows? And again, the answer is, well, it really depends on the business model, and you construct a portfolio that's a mix. And then the last concern is that, well, where are the success stories? You know, where are the exits? Where are the wealthy entrepreneurs? And that was true until maybe a couple of years ago, but now we actually have examples. Some of the SPAC mergers, even after the stock prices came down, at least earlier investors came away with good returns. We actually have some other types of strategic exits as well, like trade sales to larger companies and so forth. So we're starting to see exits. So that point is also being worked on. What I think is key here is, so we need more money for space. I think two suggestions I have: we need to bring in public money in a smart way. The US does a very good job in that. And we need to educate generalist investors about space, what's going on in space, how you can allocate to space. And that's where events like Deep Tech Forum are, of course, can be really helpful in this investor education. And then the very last point I like to make, partly because I'm sitting in Switzerland and we care a lot about impact investing, I really think a lot of space is actually impact investing. Because, you know, the only way we actually know about climate change, we can observe climate change, is through satellites, essentially, right? But that's just one example. You could also say, like, satellite communications allows us to connect people who were previously not connected, which allows things like remote education. There was just an announcement. Elon Musk was just in Brazil and announced he's connecting, I think it was 19,000 schools and like the remote Amazon via Starlink. So there's a lot of examples of how spaces impact investing. So this is also something I'd like to keep in people's minds. Okay, I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop here, but hopefully this was a useful overview.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Are you good for one question from the crowd?
Yes.
Great. So what is the estimated investment that will be needed to launch in some products into a space like right now compared to, like, say 15 years ago?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You can actually look at it in first, if you just look at it in terms of mass, right? So if you go on a SpaceX rideshare right now, as I said, and you go to what we call a low Earth orbit, you basically pay $5,000, right? So if you have like a 3-kilogram satellite, simplistically speaking, you pay like $15,000, right? Of course, there's some other costs outside the launch, right, for integration and everything. But purely in terms of launch costs, let's say $5,000 a kilogram. And then, 10, 15 years ago, that would have been at least 10, but probably much more, because it would have been difficult to even also logistically, to just launch one small satellite. But that's not all of it, right? Because you have the other technological changes that happened at the same time, things getting cheaper and things getting smaller. I haven't even talked about this, but as in many parts of technology, we have miniaturization, right? That like the same capability right now is much smaller than it was 10 years ago, or even just a few years ago, right? Think about how much more powerful your cell phones get with every generation, right? Because components get smaller. But because size is correlated typically with mass, right? That means actually the cost of taking a certain capability to space has fallen much, much more. And there's certain examples you could show, like a certain type of remote sensing satellite with a certain capability of resolution that you could now, including the launch, costs maybe $1 million. 20 years ago, it would have been $100 million. So that's the kind of like 2 orders of magnitude. That's the type of change.
So it's almost 100x cheaper now.
Yeah, for certain examples here, that's the kind of magnitude you're talking about. It's like 2 magnitudes type order.
Obi, that's awesome. So Rafael, thank you very much for coming back to the Deep Tech Forum this year. And I have good news to share with you later on. I will inform you when our Deep Tech Impact Fund is launched shortly, and definitely a lot of synergies we can explore to build more ventures and unicorns in the space industry. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rico.
Yeah. We will be looking at launching the Deep Tech Impact Fund together with Tony Suber. And let's bring Tony Suber to the front stage.
Yes. So Tony Suber is the Executive Director and Chairman of the SDG Impact Fund, and he's recognized as among one of the foremost experts in donor advised funds in the US and globally. He's responsible for the day-to-day operations and leadership across finance, primary fiduciary oversight, staff administration, and executive board management. Welcome, Tony.
So let's have a welcome applause for Tony Suber, our patronage for the Deep Tech Impact Fund. Tony, I know it's very early for you over there, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rico. I'm excited to begin this journey and to share more about who we are and what we do around the globe.
So why don't we start with introducing everyone about the SDG Impact Fund. I know you have some presentation slides to share with us, and then I will do a presentation about the Deep Tech Impact Fund after everyone have an overview on how the synergies between SDG Impact Fund and the Deep Tech Forum Impact Fund could change the world.
Sure. Let me share my screen now, and we will jump right in.
Perfect.
So the SDG Impact Fund is a US-based 501c3 public charity. We administer what are called donor advised funds. And donor advised funds have been around for a number of years. Since 1931, there has been legislation here in the US that allowed funds like ours that were specifically designated for charitable purposes to exist for the benefit of spreading good around the world, not just here, but in the US, not just here in the US, but also around the globe. There are 3,800 donor advised fund entities domiciled here in the US. However, we're one of a very few number of independents. And what I mean by independent is that we work independent, Rico, of a local area, and those entities are called community foundations. That's a very popular phrase here in the US. And there are other bank-related donor advised funds, the Wall Street funds. So a number of the large Wall Street banks also have donor advised fund platforms. And there are great pros and cons to working with all those types of entities in those particular verticals. However, we in the third vertical are independent, meaning we are independent of any bank, we are independent of any local community, and in fact, our clients are globally. They're all over the world. In fact, Rico, you're in Dubai. So we operate and exist to help families and family offices, corporations, and other nonprofits with their charitable administration. Whatever it is that they want to achieve around the world, we're there to help them administer those assets so that they can do good around the world. And I'm showing the screen here. We are a United Nations affiliated entity. We have 3 vertical relationships that we operate with and through. The first is the Office of Partnerships with Will Kennedy. The second is the Foundation for the Support of the UN with and through Janet Salazar. And the third is with their Smart Cities program with and through Kari Ike. All 3 of those are quite significant for who we are and what we do around the world. But one of the things that we espouse is all that we do, we focus on the United Nations 17 SDGs that you see here on this screen. It is our guidepost, and we spread this message far and wide because it really is a very succinct way for our world's issues and concerns to be answered. And it's a guidepost that we follow, and we hope that others will too. Here are some bullet points that I will share with the audience, and I won't go through all these, but I will just continue to highlight some of the facts that are in there. There are over 3,500 donor advised fund platforms here in the US that operate not just here, but around the world. We are a IRS recognized 501c3 public charity, and we administer donor advised funds, pooled income funds, charitable trusts, and a number of other estate instruments for families and family offices. Here are some additional information on the Donor Advised Fund and why we believe that this vehicle not only serves those here in the US, but those around the world. One of the things that we find in terms of charitable giving and charitable giving accounts is that many of our clients and the families that we work with, Rico, are very focused on what it is that they want to help the world achieve. Sometimes, though, they need the subject matter expert or the consultant, if you will, to help them manage through that process, to fill out paperwork, to make sure everyone is compliant. And those are just some of the roles that we play at the SDG Impact Fund. What we really want to accomplish is that we become a platform for good to be done around the world. That families and family offices and corporations can come to us, no matter where they are in their philanthropic journey, and leverage our platform for doing good. And doing good could mean a host of different things. Long as it fits the 17 SDGs, we're there right with you, lockstep, to help you accomplish those goals. Here's another screen on really the diaspora of opportunity that exists when you work with a donor advised fund like the SDG Impact Fund. We are able to help our clients and our benefactors span a wide range of assets in terms of their giving. Not everyone, Rico, wants to give cash and have that cash then be converted to doing good around the world. Sometimes they want to give stock, or they want to donate a meteor. We've had that conversation. Or sometimes they want to donate precious gems or gold, mineral rights that are in the ground. We even opened up an NFT program in December of last year, and now we have over 400 NFTs in our fund. And we're doing all sorts of things, as you know, in the metaverse to highlight some of those NFTs. Essentially, we want to be the Library of Congress, if you will, so that everyone in the world has an opportunity to display their NFT to the rest of the world. We don't want to be picking winners. That's not what we do. We want everyone's work to be shared with the world. Here's a typical slide, and I won't go into detail about this, but here's a typical flow of the assets that go into our fund. Someone creates an account on our platform. The account gets administered through the work that we do. Those assets are then invested in a wide variety of pools, whether that be other stocks, NFTs, cryptocurrency, you name it. We have an investment opportunity for those assets. And then at some point in the near or distant future, those assets are then granted out to charities around the world. Here is the core of our team. And I'll say a couple things about our team. 4 of the people here, including myself, are co-founders of the fund. That is Amber Nystrom, who spends most of her time in Iceland and working through and with the UN for our many partnerships there. Vince Molinari, who is out of New York, a decorated fintech professional, and Coburn Bell, also out of New York and the West Coast. Coburn is a cryptocurrency guru and head of the Museum of Crypto Art currently. And Dr. Brian Dorian, who is my number 2, my right-hand guy in the fund, a trained doctoral candidate in biochemistry, and just a decorated individual in cryptocurrency and all things tech. So that's our core team, and we traverse the world in terms of the back-end support that we give to our donors and our benefactors and the many, many charities that we serve around the world, and our affiliates, Rico, like you. Here is a screen on our independent due diligence. We, in fact, have more than 20 plus custodians that house our assets around the world. Here's just a screenshot of some of those. And as we shared earlier, we have a wide variety of assets that have been donated to our fund, whether it's cash, closely held stock, privately held, that is, publicly traded stock, gems, appreciated artwork, mineral rights. I could go on and on about the diaspora of assets, and we welcome them all. As of December of 2021, we passed the $10 billion assets under administration mark. We have had quite the meteoric rise, and we attribute that to the way in which we approach the work that we do. The many benefactors who looked at our platform and decided that, yes, we are best in class, and more importantly, we make available the ability for them to donate into their fund assets that are typically not accepted at other donor advised fund platforms. This is a saying that we espouse to, and I'll let everyone read it for themselves, but it's important that we, as a collective universal body, begin to engage one another and really find solutions to help the least of these in our world. I think we are called as human beings to make sure that we all live out the purpose of why we are here on this planet. And with that, I'll say thank you. I'm looking forward to this launch and all that we plan to accomplish together, Rico, and I'll stop here and ask if any questions.
Great, Tony. It's been good to let everyone know how the SDG Impact Fund has grown so significantly since we last had a conversation last year, and so excited that we actually bringing more lights into the deep tech sector. And of course, we are working on a range of matters, including the blockchain, crypto side of things, but there will be launch mainly in the World Blockchain Center event end of the year. But back to the Deep Tech Forum, in the healthcare sector, in the agricultural sector, in the smart city sector, there are so many verticals that actually can benefit from the donor advised fund structure. And hence, that is the focus of what we are looking at. As you know, as we have heard from earlier speakers, for example, the space industry, actually struggling to get more generalist investors, family offices, to understand how can the space industry can utilize some of the impact funds or donations to actually bring forward disruptive solutions on some of the problems we are facing on Earth, even through the in the healthcare, in a lot of new materials to be discovered from the space exploration that can actually change planet Earth. So I think that's something that we are obviously looking forward to work together on those sort of matters. And I'll without further ado, I will do a presentation about the Deep Tech Impact Fund. And just give me 1 second to pull out the full deck for this purpose. There you go. I'll just do a quick section about that.
Sure.
So I want to explain to the public about what is a Deep Tech Impact Fund and the importance of impact. The Deep Tech Forum is a platform that we have created to address some of the global concerns, the key fundamental concerns towards game changer, towards a sustainable future of human race. We have been focusing a lot on life sciences, agricultural, sustainable clean energy. And as we are aware, 97% of the deep tech ventures today contributes to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we are part of that vision and execution on that. And the core principles of deep tech is to solve problem. And it will be on multiple levels, including economic, business and social impact. And one of the main reasons why we have the Deep Tech Forum on the virtual arena, and in the near future it will be a metaverse arena, is because we want to focus on connecting minds of great visions and wisdoms and having a convergence, without having to meet physically, and comprehending the approaches that can accelerate and redefine the innovation across different verticals. Because most of the researchers and scientists that we are aware, they were so focused and working in their silos, and the community itself needs a lot of support and exposure to different verticals and industries so that the convergence can go through and change some of the initiatives and bring forward the development of the research and developments in different sectors. In terms of the growth in the deep tech, we have actually grown from 15 billion to more than 60 billion between the last 5 years. The investment in the deep tech, including private investments, minority stakes, mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, actually quadrupled over a 5-year period of time. That seems to be pretty impressive. I do believe that that figure can improve over the next 5 years, especially when we had the pandemic. A lot of things have slowed down, but we are hoping to see that in 2025, that figure should be achieving around 150 billion to 200 billion mark range. That will be very realistic. But if we can actually be part of this, that should even go higher in the next 2 to 3 years. The average disclosed amount for private investment startups was scaling from 30 million to 44 million. And for early startups, the research shows that the investments goes up to 2 million per investor. So the ticket size are relatively small. And obviously, we know the concerns about that. In the academic sector, there are more than 1,500 university and research labs being involved in deep tech. And there are more than 1,500 grants in the 2008 alone. that figures has grown up as well. We are still looking at the latest figures in 2022, but this is available publicly. So these are some of the things that we would like to see some growth in the next few years, riding on the current development. And more than 70% of the deep tech ventures actually owned their patents. And I think last year we did have a discussion about intellectual properties and some of the challenges in the IP, the structure of the IP, and conflicts between different countries in having their own standard for intellectual properties was also addressed during the Deep Tech Forum last year. So at the Deep Tech Forum, these are the primary deep tech sector that we are focusing on. It's a lot that we can actually work on, and definitely space is at the forefront. Since the last 5 years, a lot of growth has gone into space. Nanobiotechnology, robotics, renewable energy, green energy, agricultural technology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, smart cities and conscious cities, and in the healthcare sector. And in the agricultural tech itself, it will be very important, especially for us on planet Earth in the next 5 years, as we are seeing a huge food supply chain problems due to climate change, due to man-made issues such as war, and so on and so forth, natural disasters. So I think that is something for human to survive through food supply issues. I think we have to come together to resolve this as an industry. Talent has always been a focus in any deep tech sector. The convergence of talent, knowledge, and wisdom is so crucial to the forum, and that's where we want to bring in, expert scientists to share their latest research and development. And this is where we want to share the knowledge with relevant industry stakeholders, so that will be able to drive the innovations further in a more timely manner and expedite this if possible, to actually create a better world for all of us. So the Deep Tech Impact Fund will be the pillar to fund most of these initiatives, as mentioned earlier on, and it's a joint venture between the SDG Impact Fund and Sanctum Global Ventures. And in summary, the Deep Tech Impact Fund is actually the next mile of effort where we need to be out there and influence the whole industry in the deep tech sector. A lot of investors, a lot of general partners and lead partners are still not aware, not even looking into the deep tech sector. And this is where we want them to be part of this movement together, and to ignite the awareness, and to be part of this Deep Tech Impact Fund, to converge the power and advancement of technology to give back and to create a better world for today, tomorrow, and for our future generations. And the purpose is also very strategically aligned with the United Nations 17 SDGs towards the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a blueprint to achieve better and more sustainable future for all. As mentioned by Tony, this is the 17 SDGs, and we are definitely aligned with that for the Deep Tech Impact Fund. And the fund structure from the Deep Tech Forum is that we have the Deep Tech Impact Fund, where we also have the smart cities, healthcare, agri-tech, so on and so forth. So there will be a number of separate impact funds under the Deep Tech Impact Fund that will be targeting at certain sector and industries, and we'll be working very closely with the SDG Impact Fund to achieve these missions. And I do not need to repeat this again for SDG Impact Fund. Tony is very concise on the mechanism and why the Donor Advice Fund as a platform is so important. And the history of Donor Advice Fund has also been illustrated by Tony Suber. And we welcome all the stakeholders in collaborating with the Deep Tech Impact Fund. Feel free to contact Tony and myself we are working very closely towards this vision and the purpose as our priority. And we are always looking for the right partners to further expand the impact we can make to the world and our future. Also, I would like to thank the Malala Fund for partnering with the Deep Tech Forum this year, where we have recognized, that we will start sponsoring education for children with Malala Fund. And this is one of the milestones that the Deep Tech Forum has committed and making it happen to advocate for education and also dealing with the policies and practices changes to help girls to go to schools. So I think that is something that we are also committed, and we want to support more girls and women to get better education and equality in the society. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank some of our media partners, including the Deep Tech Insider and the IDP.net. With that, I'd like to thank Sonny Super for joining us today. And we are launching the Deep Tech Impact Fund together at the Deep Tech Forum 2022. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Sonny, let's not move. I think we have some questions going on. Earlier on, most of the delegates at the Deep Tech Forum asked, how fast do you think Elon Musk can achieve this idea of allowing humans to download human brain into robots through his Neuralink project? And what kind of change would that have our lifestyle if this is to happen, in our day-to-day life, if this is allowed to happen? Tony, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that we are, and I don't know that I truly understand the technology. I'll begin there. But I will tell you that for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, we have already developed our human bodies in a cyborg-like manner. And I'll be very succinct with my description. As healthcare and science advances, you've seen knee replacements become a big part of our healthcare system. Okay, anything that allows the human body to go from its current structure as you are when you're born to an enhanced structure to create a longer life, a more sustainable life, that is already putting us on the path to enhanced living. When you look at the growth of stent technology, the fact that we can make a slit, not even as large as your fingernail bed, that will allow a robot to travel, an instrument to travel up to and through and near your heart, to drop a device that opens up and actually can administer long-term drugs over an 8, 10, 15-year time frame. And over time, we become more and more accustomed to these cyborg-like advancements. And we haven't even touched on prosthetics, right? The fact that we can take someone, an amputee, whether they've served in the military or they were born as an amputee, the fact that we can enhance their life with science and prosthesis that enables them to be productive citizens, I think we will begin to accept more and more over time. But I think we have to be careful, right? With what I consider to be the God complex. I think we as humans are meant to be born, live a life, and pass on and create a legacy. I don't know that we have been meant or created to live forever. So those are my thoughts.
So Tony, would you like to share with everyone here on some of the new partners that will be bringing on board potentially to the Deep Tech Impact Fund through the SDG Impact Fund network?
So, wow, Rico, there are so many, and I hesitate to leave anyone out. But in terms of healthcare, I want to speak more broadly about some of the areas. When you think about some of the diseases that are harm our planet, we have begun a conversation around diabetes. Diabetes is a huge disease in terms of the effects that it has on populations around the world. So many here in the audience will hear about developments with regard to diabetes and even other areas of healthcare and enhancing our longevity. And again, I don't want to single out any companies, but to make aware to the audience that we are working hard behind the scenes on topics like these and many, many others. With regard to smart cities, I can think of at least 10 right off the top of my head that, that we are currently working with and will be announcing to the world with regard to taking and meeting the municipalities where they are, cities around the world, meeting them where they are and helping them progress. I've said in other meetings, we have so much data, Rico, that surrounds us on a regular basis. The fact that we can now install sensors that measure air quality and water quality, and we have, I mean, we've got sensors for red lights and green lights. But what do we do, right, with all that data? The fact that we can help communities in the third world, not just communities where we live in advanced communities, but communities in the third world use amazing data that they're already collecting, but not sure what to do with it. Again, a host of different companies that are there. I don't want to single anyone out just yet, but there's so much more to come. And I'm looking forward to engaging the world in terms of funding these projects and looking forward to partnering with them.
So on the healthcare that you have mentioned, I'd like to add on that the Deep Tech Forum Impact Fund will be prioritizing on healthcare first. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit that we can actually make a changes to the world, where I will be focusing on dealing with cancer. In terms of that, we'll be announcing some partnerships with some breakthrough in curing cancers, and also with regards to HIV communities, there will be also some breakthrough to actually cure HIV through some of the latest health tech that we have actually discovered. So I think stay tuned to some of these latest Deep Tech Impact Fund initiatives that Tony and myself and the whole wider community that will be part of this movement that will be converging to bring changes to the wider community on Earth. So without further ado, I'd like to thank Tony again for launching the Deep Tech Impact Fund together with me. And I will hand the stage back to the Deep Tech Forum Secretariat to bring in our speakers next. Thank you very much, Tony.
Thanks for having me. Be well.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
So up next, we have Somi Aryan, who's come back because there were questions that were unanswered. So Somi, and just to recap, Somi discussed understanding AI's impact in society. Hi, Aurelia.
Hi, Karine. Can we bring Somi forward?
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming back. We had a couple of questions earlier. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to relay all of them to you. So one of the questions, going straight into it, was actually about what are your thoughts on AI's impact after the pandemic? How did you see the industry evolve, and what do you see it? How do you see it moving forward?
That's a very good question. Actually, the pandemic has definitely accelerated the development of it. When I was writing my book, which was, I wrote it in 2019, it came out bang in the middle of the pandemic, I was looking at a transition of around 5 to 15 years to the things that I talk about in the book, like the way that AI is impacting the society. And actually, I would say that that has now accelerated to around 3 to 7 years. So it's definitely, you know, at least sped up everything by a great degree. Of course, there is now one of the issues, of course, there's the problem of supply chain, which means that in terms of development of hardware, we have got some issues with that. But in terms of software, there's nothing, you know, stopping us, and software eventually will eat the world, right? As we know. So the short answer is that it has actually accelerated it.
Okay.
So that means that we have less time to prepare.
Very good. Thank you so much for that answer. And I'll move on straight to my next question, actually, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And having you on this panel, on this forum today is not only very impressive, but it's encouraging for young women around the world looking into the tech industry and looking into AI as a career. And as you know, we've partnered with the Malala Fund, and we have received quite a few interesting questions on your person and what you do. Obviously, FemPec is all about raising women's socioeconomic status. So one of the questions was actually, how does FemPec impact the development of those women? And what is being done not only by FemPec, but also by other players in the industry to advance women socioeconomic development in third world countries or third world economies?
Well, you know, I left Iran, so I no longer live in a third world country. The reason is that it was just so limiting. Like, there are so many opportunities that I have now in the UK I wouldn't have had in Iran. So the truth is that actually it's very, very difficult, you know, for women and other, you know, diverse background, groups of diverse background. So actually we are rebranding FemPeak to InPeak, so that in for inclusive, inspire, in this together, so that it's no longer just focused on women, but it's focused on a wider community. But of course, the FemPeak will become a subset of InPeak. And the truth is that we have to take things in our own hands, and we cannot wait for governments, for organizations to solve our problems. I actually prepared, I'm kind of happy that we had to redo this. I wanted to share my screen for a second and show you a picture of where I was born, if that's okay. So this is a picture of where I was born and how I grew up. This is how poor we were. I really want, you know, I cherish this picture so much, you know, like, you know, where I grew up, nobody spoke English. I taught myself English. You know, we didn't have any money. We didn't have, nobody in my family had even ever traveled outside of their town, let alone leaving the country. And I ended up studying in St. Andrews University, where Prince William studied. I started working for European embassies when I was 19, worked for United Nations when I was 21. And, you know, since I was 17, I was working as a tour guide for VIP tours coming into Iran. You know, so like right now, you know, I'm in Dubai, paid quite a lot of money to come in and speak on a conference, right? So these are things that nobody helped me. I just did it myself. So I just want to let people know that you have to not wait for somebody to hand it to you. You just have to take things in your own hand. Something like FemPeak, for example, we get quite a lot of people from various countries where they reach out to me and they say, like, I'm in Canada, you know, or I'm in, like, you know, Kenya, whatever, you know, and I don't have the money for, you know, to participate or become a member. And I give them a code, and I'm like, my gift to you, just join. You know, I give them a code to get a free membership. So we do these types of things. I can't speak for other people, but I think that there's so much that we can do to impact, and there's so much free education available, you know, free or cheap education available. You just need to apply yourself and learn and innovate.
That's very impressive. And looking back at the picture that you shared, actually a beautiful picture. But what would you tell that little girl in Iran? Like, did you even dream of becoming the person that you are today?
I dreamed about it. I dreamed about it every day. And, you know, and I was like, I knew what I was going to do and become. And I'm still, you know, I still dream about it every day because I'm still not where I want to be. I'm like continuing, you know, this. I dreamt about it every day. I worked for it every day. And I just pushed for it every day. And I kept knocking the doors. And eventually some of them opened, you know, so it's like, you know, I had many failures, and I still have failures, you know. So what I would say to that little girl is that I would, if I could go back and talk to my little self, I would say it's going to be okay. Because, you know, it was very stressful growing up, you know, thinking about, well, am I going to make it? Am I not going to make it? I would just tell her, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You just have to keep going.
And that's definitely true. Again, kind of bringing myself a little bit on the stage, coming from a third world country as well, I definitely understand your point of view. And that leads me to the other question that we've received, which is kind of linked to the previous one, but what would be your advice to this young boy or young girl, independent of where they're from, in terms of education and career progression to be able to penetrate the artificial intelligence industry? What would you recommend to study?
Well, I would say you really have to apply yourself. And the truth is that as people who come from you know, as a woman, as a person of color, as a person who comes from an underprivileged background, we have to work harder than everybody else. We have to be the smartest person in the room. We have to work harder than everybody else because we are not given, like, there are certain privileges that we don't have. You know, whether it's the nature of our passport, which means that we can't travel as easily. Right now, I'm a British citizen. It took me 11 years to become a British citizen, so I couldn't travel as easily, right? So we have to work harder. That meant that I had less opportunities for playing games. I had less opportunities for watching Netflix. Like even today, like I haven't watched a single Netflix series or, you know, TV show or whatever for like over 2.5 years, maybe nearly three years. I haven't watched a single thing. I'm like, I work 15 hours a day. You have to apply yourself, right? You have to apply yourself. You have to just keep going, just like, you know, just work very hard, and it will work out. It will, you know, people will notice you. People will notice you and they will open the doors for you.
Honestly, we are so happy to have had you twice today. Congratulations on all your achievements and on your amazing book. We look forward to having you at future events, and we wish you the best of luck. I just have to make a little paragraph here with regards to all the boys and girls that are watching you. I really think you're an inspiration for them, and we look forward to having you again, and we look forward to watching what you do next, which is very impressive. So thank you so much, Somi, for coming back, and we will definitely be sharing this information with our partners, and we wish you all the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you so much, Somi.
Thank you again, Somi, for that and for sharing your expertise and your knowledge aside from your topic. So now we're going to play a quick video from our charity partner, Malala Fund. And just to reiterate, we will be making a charitable contribution to the Malala Fund to sponsor children's education for 1 year. I'd also again like to thank our media partners, ITP.net and the Deep Tech Insider. You can find them on social media at ITPNet and at Deep Tech Insider.
Too often, they lack the funding or platform to increase their impact. That's why Malala Fund invests in local leaders. They understand the problems girls face in their communities and how to solve them. With funding, training, and networking opportunities, Malala Fund gives our education champions the support their projects need to take off. Together, these advocates are generating progress in the countries where most girls are out of school. In rural Afghanistan, Rahmatullah Arman recruits and trains young women as educators because many parents won't allow their teenage daughters to learn from male teachers.
We are making sure that all girls receive safe and secure education.
In Lebanon, Naila Fahid is using offline server technology to help Syrian refugee girls catch up on schoolwork.
Children get very motivated when you come with a digital program.
And in northern Nigeria, Munira Yarima helps convince parents to send their daughters back to school after they are forced out by Boko Haram insurgents.
We are seeing that the girls are now comfortable to be able to speak out with regards to what is their challenges to education.
Across communities and countries, Malala Fund's education champions work together to change the policies and practices that hold girls back. At global events, Malala Fund opens doors.
We go to other communities and help out-of-school girls in need,
so they can speak directly with presidents and prime ministers and tell them what girls in their communities need to learn. When girls go to school, everyone benefits. Girls' education lowers poverty rates, improves public health, and reduces risks of wars. If every girl had 12 years of education, they could add up to $30 trillion to the global economy. Join Malala Fund in our fight for education and equality. Together, we can give every girl the opportunity to learn and lead.